Welcome back to Mastering Change. Today's episode is one that really took us by surprise in the best possible way.
We're joined by Alicia Kindleysides, whose work explores how reading and writing, especially romance fiction, can support healing from trauma.
She introduces us to some fascinating ideas you may not have heard of, like the fade response, hiding as a coping mechanism, and an expanded view of trauma that goes well beyond fight, flight, or freeze.
This is a conversation about how stories can hold us when words are hard to find, and about how creative expression can be an act of recovery, and why healing doesn't always look like talking.
Whether you work in mental health or you've simply ever felt safe inside of a book, like I have, this one will stay with you.
Let's begin. It's my pleasure to welcome today Dr. Alicia Kindleysides to the podcast. Hi, Alicia.
Hi, Emma. How are you?
Well, thank you. Welcome.
Hi, Alicia. It's such a pleasure to have you here. As with all of our podcasts, we have a tradition where we start the recording with a little game. It's a pack of cards, a deck of cards, and in these cards are various prompts. They are prompts for storytelling, and that stories are bridges to connection, and we would like to connect with you, and we'd like to connect with our audience. So we thought this was a really good way to break the ice with all of our podcast guests. So I've shuffled this deck of cards now. I'm going to pull out the top one. I've got no idea what it says. I'm hoping I removed some of the more flavoursome ones, and I'm going to read one that's not a pink one. Okay, and it says, I spend too much time worrying about ...
I spend too much time worrying about if I'm overthinking something too much. Spend too much time overthinking.
There we are. So you spend too much time worrying about the fact that you might be overthinking. So the time is done.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Exactly right.
And why do you think you overthink things? Do you have any insight into that?
Oh, definitely. Perfect timing to be on this podcast. It's definitely a trauma response from childhood, overthinking every little detail in order, not to get in trouble, to keep everyone safe and all that sort of thing. So it's definitely a childhood lingering trauma response. So, and I'm aware of it, and I tell myself, okay, you're overthinking. You need to just cut that out.
And do you have any tools or techniques to kind of slow your mind and stop overthinking?
Yeah, it is. I think one of the first things is becoming aware that it's something that you do. So that's, since, researching trauma, I've become aware of that. So I know that that is what I'm doing. So, being aware of it, I think, is the first step. And then being able to say, okay, you can let this go now. You don't need to be worrying about every little detail.
Yeah, it's a form of hypervigilance, isn't it? You kind of...
It is.
Yeah, and it makes you think about, because I've definitely can relate to that in periods of my life when I'm looking to kind of maybe control. And I think one of the big shifts for me in terms of that was tuning back into that instinctive behavior. It's almost like I'd lost sight of, the inner knowledge of what the right direction, the right decision, and almost letting go a little bit and going back into that intuition, because I do think that hypervigilance tunes you out of that innate understanding of innate ability to scan a situation and make decisions around what's next, or look at danger relative to the situation. When you're in vigilance, everything's really exaggerated, isn't it? And
exactly
bigger. So
and you can't necessarily make the best judgment at the time.
Yeah,
because exactly. Yeah, there's no rationality going on. So you do need to become a bit more aware, and this is what I'm doing, and it's time to stop that now. And I like what you said just before, because it does come to that place where you've got to start trusting yourself and listening to yourself and bringing it back inside.
And losing the fear of what might be if you execute a decision and it isn't,
Yeah.
like having that ability and permission to get things a little bit wrong.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. I like
yeah,
that. Giving
yeah,
yourself permission to get things wrong. That's really
yeah.
good.
Well, it was a really lovely answer and a nice way to start the conversation. Thank
Oh,
you.
well, thank you.
So I guess we're here today to talk about how you relate to the field of trauma, mental health and well-being. It'd be great
Yes.
you to just download some of that with us, and we'll chip in, we'll ask questions, and we'll converse accordingly.
Fantastic. I'm thinking that the way my slot into trauma is going to be a little bit different to what you've had on the podcast. So I have just recently finished my PhD. It was actually in creative arts. And what I was researching was the representation of trauma, post-trauma effects, and trauma recovery attempts in romance novels. And yeah, so I came into it in a sideways angle. And upon doing all this research, I discovered a couple of interesting different trauma-related theories, and probably the most interesting one that your listeners will find most interesting, I think, is something I have termed the fade response. And it actually came about in a bit of a different way as well. So it came about via a nightmare I had. I had this nightmare about a woman who was in a bank heist, and she was hiding behind something to stay safe. And because I've been studying trauma, everything I've been watching, all popular culture, everything I've been reading, seeing on TV, if there's some sort of trauma involved, I've been saying, oh, what trauma response is that? What trauma response are they portraying there? So I had this nightmare and I was thinking, what trauma response is this? And I thought, okay, it's not fight, it's not flight, it's not freeze. And I went back through all of the research, and there were a couple of researchers I noted, such as an Australian, I don't know if you've heard of her, she's called Anna Ferguson. So Anna Ferguson and Pete Walker had referred to hiding, but they had referred to it aligned with, it was either flight or freeze. And then I also looked at Bessel's work, Bessel van der Kolk's, and who else? Dr. Paul Conti. And they had mentioned hiding, but not, it was sort of in throwaway lines even, and they didn't differentiate it. So I then went through situations that had happened in my past and thought, okay, there have been times as a trauma response where I've hidden. And I thought, oh, could this be a different response? And the more that I looked into the literature, I could see people had referred to hiding as a trauma response. And I just sort of differentiated it more and defined it and explained what fading is. And yeah, so originally I was calling it hiding, and then I thought, no, it's got to be an F word, because all the other fight, flight, fright, fawn, they're all F words. I thought, no, it can't be hiding. It can't be the hiding response. So yeah, going through all these different trauma theories, and I saw Dr. Paul Conti was talking about a client of his who had faded into the background, and I thought, oh, fade. because I had been thinking as well, oh, these people, they're like fading away. And I thought, well, I can't call it fading away. So then when I saw Dr. Paul Conti had said, oh, this client had faded into the background, and I went, yes, it's the fade response. So yeah, I came at it through a sideways angle.
So would you consider, so I know you mentioned Pete Walker there, and so would you consider this the fifth F rather than the fourth?
Well, in my research, I've actually come up with 9: fight, flight, fright, freeze, fawn, faint, flag, flood, and fade.
Well done.
I got them all. I got them all. So basically, I just synthesized and adapted what all these other people I've just mentioned, plus others I haven't, all of their different words and theories, and put them all together, plus fade as well. So it comes up to the 9F trauma response model.
Okay.
We're getting a lot of them. We're getting a lot of Fs in there.
I mean, I actually would like flood as well. I think that's a great one. But I mean, so fade. So describe. So why fade specific? Would you say fade is one of the ones that is most common in a romance novel setting? Is that why you kind of are focusing on that one more than the others?
Not necessarily. I'm focusing on that one because that's the one that I theorized. So it just worked out that way. But yeah, it has a few different applications. So most people would have experienced it to some degree. You've both probably experienced it where, for instance, you're in a situation and you think, oh my gosh, can the ground just swallow me up? I don't want to be here. Can I just be invisible? I just want to go away. I just don't want to be here. Please, no one look at me. That sort of response is the fade response, where you're just not wanting to be there, wanting to be invisible. You want to get away and hide.
And where from the trauma response, do you know where that comes from?
Well, this is where more research is going to be needed, because this is all just new from my PhD research. So it would obviously, because of all the other trauma responses, are just a natural part of the, like an automatic response from the nervous system. So it would be a part of that natural response of the nervous system in order to keep the person safe. And we can see the fade response lingering post-trauma as well. Think of people who have experienced trauma and they use clothes to hide themselves. They hide themselves with clothes, or they hide themselves behind their hair.
Or they're the kind of people that don't leave the house because
Yes,
they're
exactly.
getting like agoraphobia. What's the word? It's not agoraphobia when he's
Agoraphobia.
yeah.
Yeah.
And also,
So hiding in their bedroom and their houses, that's a fade response as well.
a big trauma kind of response, or a big kind of symptom of post-traumatic experiences are that people lose their voices. They're not able to speak up. They're not able to say anything.
Yes.
If they're feeling, hurt, or someone's either being mean or whatever in a situation, they won't stand up for themselves. They lose their voice, really, like they lose their voice and their courage.
That's really interesting because that can be from a physical appearance or a physical function perspective. So the voice fades, but also, this
Yes.
people go grey. There is a physical fade. People use their body language. If you think about sensory motor psychotherapy, people fade. I mean, I know when I was
They scrunch up.
when I was obese, my posture just went. I just used to lean forward, let my clothes cover me, and
Exactly. Fade response.
Exactly, the fade response. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's one of the symptoms I put in my PhD was, the contracting of your body language and the lowering of the head. And yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, screaming.
And it would, yeah, I would love to do more research on, the physiological aspects of it, because at the moment it's all theoretical. And one of the examples I gave in my PhD, if you need a more visual aspect to it, is thinking about, say, this is going to be very stereotypical, so excuse me, but when a mother is out with her child and somebody the mother knows but the child doesn't approaches, what does the child do? They immediately duck behind and run behind, the scoop behind the mother, or they duck behind the mother. So that's a fade response. They don't want to be seen. They just don't, I'm not here, ignore me.
Interesting.
But that, in that instance, that wouldn't be a trauma response necessarily, because the child may not have experienced any trauma at that point. That's just a protection response. Like, this is my safe space.
Or fear. It's
Like,
that,
my safe person, and that person's protecting me, so I'm going to go behind there. I think.
Yes, fear, which does also equate to trauma. And when I talk about it in my PhD, I refer to it as a FAST response, which stands for fear, anxiety, stress, and trauma. So they're all on the trauma spectrum anyway. Fear, anxiety, stress, and trauma. It's all different levels, and some of them can be, triggered from a childhood issue that has created the trauma that makes you react that way as well. So,
sure. But I mean, one thing I always try and caution is there's an overuse of the word trauma in our world now currently.
correct.
There are emotions are there for a reason, and they are not there because of like any sort of trauma. So fear is healthy, if a child sees someone they don't know,
Keeps you safe.
yeah, just to keep you safe. And anger is healthy as long as
Exactly.
it's not necessarily triggered by a traumatic response. It's triggered because someone has done something that's upset you, so you are allowed to be angry without someone saying, oh, that was your past trauma. So we have to be really careful, I think, in walking that balance and not saying that all fear is a trauma response, because that's not the case.
That's correct. Exactly. It's not all trauma based, and that's why I mention it in my PhD, that it's actually part of the FAST responses: fear, anxiety, stress, and trauma.
So having completed the PhD and having this career as a novelist and this kind of like, potential as an academic and commentator on that field, which path are you pursuing and with what intention?
Oh, that's the question. I would really love to look at, because my PhD did this a little bit, where I looked at the benefits of bibliotherapy and scriptotherapy, so reading and writing for healing, as therapy. So this is something I'd like to, so that's sort of bridging the two of them, writing and trauma theory, bringing them together. So yeah, using writing and or reading as a therapeutic method. And I know some research has been done on this. I wouldn't be the first person to do it, but yeah, that is definitely a passion area for me at the moment.
I think it's I think writing and journaling. I actually don't know much about reading and for healing, but I think writing for healing is so beneficial. I've seen it time and time again.
So much.
Just journaling your own, at the end of the day, your own thoughts. It helps you process whatever experiences you've had. I think I think everyone should do it, really. I wish I did it. I know I don't. I definitely helped me if I had the time to sit down and journal. But no, I think it's a great modality, to be honest. But I've never heard of reading.
You see, I related to that in some way. So I use writing to organize. It's a very kind of functional relationship. So I could only relate to what you were saying personally, just caveat. But I use writing as a means of consolidating ideas in my head. I often write with a pencil, and sometimes do mix. I definitely have notebooks, or I scribble because it's a way of me sense making and joining the dots between things. But then I reflected on the reading. Actually, at really difficult times in my life, I've escaped to a book. It's the only
Yep.
time I've been able, because you have to focus on reading.
Yes.
It's like yoga. What is yoga to me now? It's the only time I can switch off my brain and engage. But reading's a much more passive way of me getting a similar sort of outcome of detaching
Yeah.
from the emotional state and stepping into something either physical or, in the case of reading, something that requires my attention in order for it to make any sense.
Yeah, because it requires, even though it is relatively passive, it's still your brain is quite active while you're doing that, while you're reading.
Yeah.
I think the key word there is as well. It's the escapism, isn't it? In a sense, and
Yeah.
I mean, I think there needs. I don't know if you know any research, but I wonder because there is when you are a traumatized individual, definitely will use fantasy or will use stories or will use whatever to escape imagination if they can to escape from their reality, and that can then lead to dissociation or whatever it can go on to. But
Yeah.
books. I wonder if books and reading can be a healthy way of essentially disassociating, I suppose, from the reality. But I don't know. I don't know any research around it, but it's an interesting idea.
It is. And yeah, I think there needs to be a lot more research, obviously. That's why I want to research it. But yeah, it's one of those I don't know if I would end up having to focus on one or the other, because maybe tackling both might be a little bit too much. Doing bibliotherapy and scriptotherapy, I can see it blowing out. So
I think bibliotherapy makes sense because it's universally applicable. There's a requirement of creativity to write. Read is much more, you know.
Disagree. So you see, so I used to sort of charity. I started a creative writing charity that used to go into prisons and teach addicted prisoners how to write, not how to write, addicted prisoners to write. These are people with zero education, people with like big, like serious crimes, people in prison for multiple years, never really lasted in the education system. And they used to sit there in groups, say, I can't write, won't write, what's a poem? Well, I don't know what you're talking about. A few weeks into that, and then suddenly they were like, please, please, please let me read my poem first. Please, please, please let me read the first thing. It was unbelievable the way that they did not know, like in inverted commas, how to write, how to be creative. But we've all got an innate ability to put pen to paper, and whatever you write down is
But maybe then, in which case, build it on that point. Maybe it's about where do you get people to start, and how do you migrate them to somewhere, because you also need it's good. But I do think with both, it's a bit of a lost art. If you look at the curriculums around the world, creativity, writing, art, expression, it's a second-class citizen to literacy, numeracy, politics, and so I think it's, the more evidence base we can create for its application in as a preventative measure. But what's really interesting is what you're saying is as a treatment modality. How does that look?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, definitely as a treatment modality.
And I think I think it would be more interesting to do bibliotherapy because I've never heard of it, and I think that I obviously research on creative writing for healing. I know that I know the research myself, and I know that many kind of treatment centers or clinics or whatever will, in fact, most people will recommend that you write. It doesn't matter if you know how to write or not, that you just put something down every day, even if it's literally like, I did this and it felt bad. I did that.
Yes.
Whatever. That's just that's how you start just getting what's inside, outside, and processing it.
Agree.
There's plenty lots of research around that, or more than there has about any kind of bibliotherapy. And I think as anything that hasn't been researched, I mean, it might have been, we're sitting here saying it hasn't. I really hope that no one writes in and says, I did look.
There has been. There has been.
Well, that'd be great if they do. It would be great if they do. I mean, the more you can be aware of that research, and we can celebrate research that's got validity in the context of trauma healing, the better. But good place to start.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And I'm not aware of any big studies. I'm not saying it hasn't been. I'm just not personally aware of any big long-term studies on bibliotherapy. So, yeah, I think that would be really interesting. And being a writer myself, I have that passion for the bibliotherapy as well. And a lot of my novels have trauma themes in them. Hence, that's the reason I was researching them.
Do you
So,
think with bibliotherapy, do you think it would be any kind, like, because I mean, with any kind of creative writing modality, it's sort of any writing goes, it's whatever. Do you think it would be any book, or would there be specific books that people would read? Any book?
no, not any book. Specific
Oh.
specific books. The little bit of research that I've done, it is specific books for specific, presenting conditions. And again, I haven't done much research on this, so I'm not the right person to be asking about specifics until I've done my research on it. But yes, from what I understand, it is it's like a prescription. Another term for it is book prescribing. So somebody comes in presenting with XYZ symptoms, and the bibliotherapist prescribes them a book or poems. It doesn't necessarily have to be a book. It can be poems or anything else that they like to read. And yeah, I would really love to learn a lot more about that and research it.
It's interesting. It reminds me, actually, it's just triggered a memory for me, which is that when we were having a conversation with the therapist the other day, Emma, who created 3 videos, for example, as almost like a prescription for couples. And then, yes, it would be a similar sort of thing. And it might be that these particular books prompt a new perspective, a different way of thinking.
Yeah, that's fascinating, because what I always think with a book is you bring your own references and experiences to the visualization of how that's 3-dimensionalized. It's why so many people, when a book gets turned into a film, it just doesn't do it for them, because the picture they
Yes.
in their mind was so much richer and and appealed to them more, because it was a direct reflection of their experiences and the stimulus put in front of them in the context of the book. So it'd be fascinating to think about, how to capture what is it about the bibliotherapy that creates the change.
I think it's the fact, partly what you just said, where we create these own images in our head. And I think to some extent, we project ourselves and our experiences onto the events of the book. So I think, and again, I'm going to have to research this. This is just a hypothesis. I think in that projection, there is possibility for healing to happen, where we're projecting ourselves, our experiences, our vision of the book based on our own experiences. So I think that's in between space, I think, where healing can possibly happen.
You mean, like, if an event, as long as, I guess, and that's why it has to be prescribed. You're right, the books have to be prescribed, because if the event in the book has a better ending or a different ending to perhaps the ending that you had in your own experience, then you're able to visualize something different happening. It's different. Yeah, it's a bit like the other podcast that we recorded, Emma, where they would do, I think it was virtual reality, and she was saying with the children, they would put this virtual reality headset on, and they would create a different ending to, like, say they had a nightmare, and it was a scary monster came out from under the bed and the monster ate them. Put the virtual reality headset on, and they could have a different, the monster didn't eat them and the monster died or whatever, disappeared from under the bed. So they create a new reality for themselves. And I guess that could happen in the book if they can
an alternative perspective on the experience.
Yeah.
So that's interesting, because that then it makes it a really integrated thing with the therapist, because of what the therapist knows of the trauma and the trauma response. The prescribing becomes quite an art, really.
It does. It does. And I think for those people who don't like going to therapy and talking, I think this is where arts like scriptotherapy and bibliotherapy can really help out those resistant clients who just don't want to be, and fair enough, they don't, they've been traumatized. They don't want to be sitting there recounting their story on a couch to someone. And I know that's very cliched, but for those sorts of clients who are not that way inclined, a book prescription, or here, have this writing exercise that you can go home and do, and you don't even need to show it to me as the therapist. I think those sorts of therapies could be really helpful.
I mean, I think all creative therapies, I mean, especially when we're dealing with trauma, sitting on a couch and talking about your trauma history is never going to be beneficial really for anyone. But I think that's where creative therapies and body-based therapies are so important for that particular population. But I'm wondering, on a scalability perspective, I know, Emma, you just said that the art of prescribing the books is really important. But I wonder also whether there are prevention, like books that will prevent certain behavior. There could be so then you could start prescribing these books in schools, and you could start we get a much bigger scale of healing.
I like this.
Yeah, it'd be really
to prevent any problems before they begin. I like this. Yeah, my research project is getting huge.
So that's where you
ASAP.
Yeah, definitely. So that's where you see your focus is. I'm guessing you're going to continue to write, because most writers I know
Of course.
prolific.
Of course. I'm already working on the next book, so
There you go. But your intention is to pursue an academic career and continue to research
alongside it. Yeah. I'll always write as well as research. So, and researching bibliotherapy is kind of a sneaky way for me to be able to do both.
Yeah,
absolutely. And one feeds the other, right? All the research that you've done, trauma work and all the trauma studies is definitely going to make your books much more realistic and beneficial, and resonate more with the readers for sure.
Yeah, there's a real there's a sweet spot between your lived experience, your writer experience, and
the research.
Exactly.
Yeah, and those three things combined in my PhD research, it was a really intense, sometimes challenging, but also rewarding experience having those three things to combine, because again, I ended up coming up with this fade response theory. So it was just interesting how it all combined, and out of an essentially creative arts PhD, I ended up coming up with a trauma theory. So strange things happen.
Yeah, beautiful things happen. It's good to be able to join the dots, I guess, and see the benefit of doing such. So I'm now going to ask you the question that we ask all of our podcast guests.
Ooh, okay. Yep.
You live in a world of lots of fear and anxiety and doubt. There's big things happening on a macro level that we're all more aware of than we ever were before, because of the world that we live in and just the way things are now. If there was one lever for change that you could pull, one button that you could push, what would it be? What's the single most important thing, in your opinion, to create the change that we need to see?
Be more understanding of other people. Don't be so quick to judge. It's so easy for us to just jump on someone and judge them instead of trying to appreciate their differences and their different perspective and experiences that we have no idea about. So try to be more understanding.
Yeah, I think if everyone adopted that, we'd live in a much healthier world. Yeah. Alicia, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. Thank you for making time.
Yay! It's been a pleasure to talk to you both as well. Thank you so much.